In our last tutorial about perspective, we covered the many words or terminology that we're going to need to know in order to draw things three-dimensionally. So today we're going to take this knowledge, our knowledge about horizontal, vertical, parallel, intersect, line, figure, solid, horizon line, vanishing point. We're going to take our knowledge of those terms and we're going to apply it. What we're going to attempt to do today is to draw realistic 3D looking solids drawn in one-point perspective. Feel free to pause this video anywhere along the way so that you can draw along with me. The tools that we're going to need: a blank sheet of paper, an eraser, a ruler, and you'll need a pencil. For today's tutorial, I'm going to be using ebony pencils. They're very, very dark so that through the camera you can see all the lines that I draw. When you draw in class or on your own, you can just use normal number 2 pencils. The way that we begin any perspective drawing is to first draw the horizon line. The horizon line is going to be right about the middle of the paper, and it's a straight line that goes horizontally the long ways through the paper. Now this line does not have to be exactly in the middle. If you're the type of person that really likes accuracy and precision, you can simply fold the paper in half and that will tell you where the exact middle is. But actually the placement of the horizon line can be changed, but we normally keep it about the middle. The second thing that we're going to need to start off our drawing after the horizon line is a vanishing point. It's a single dot that is going to go in the middle of our paper. And again, this is one-point perspective. We'll look in future tutorials on how to use more than just one vanishing point. Now from here, we're going to need a little bit of help. There's 4 steps to be able to complete a three-dimensional drawing using perspective. Step 1 is that we're going to draw a figure. Remember, another word for this is shape. It's a closed line that creates a two-dimensional shape. The second step is that we're going to take that figure and connect it to the vanishing point. I've just written VP on my sheet, but keep in mind that VP is going to stand for our vanishing point. Step 3 is to do parallel. Step 4 is to erase. So here's what that looks like then. We're going to begin on our papers by drawing a figure, a two-dimensional figure, and we'll get something that is like a square. You don't have to exactly measure for your lines, but we do use the ruler to create an accurate square or a rectangle, some box type form. So we draw line by line, carefully matching up with our ruler. And now I have a box. Step 1 is to draw a figure. Step 2 is to take that figure, this square that we've just drawn, and we're going to connect it to the vanishing point. Now these lines that we're going to draw are basically going to connect from the corners down to the vanishing point right here. We're going to use a ruler to do so. One tip though is our last step is to erase. We are going to erase part of what we work on right now, and actually it is this step that we do partial erasing on. In your drawing, you may want to put these lines in very lightly. You can always darken them later. But we match up from the corner of our box that we've drawn to the vanishing point, and we draw a connection line. We move to the next corner. Match up our ruler accurately with the vanishing point and the corner, and we draw that line. We have one more to go. I'm only going to connect 3 corners of the box because I'm going to make it an opaque solid, meaning that I can't see through it. For an interesting challenge, you can attempt to connect all 4 corners, and that will make what is a transparent solid. It makes the next couple of steps a little bit more difficult, but since this is our first time, we're going to avoid that step for now. So now I have completed step 1, which is to draw a figure. Step 2, I've taken from the corners of my box and connected those lines to the vanishing point. Now without even going further, we can actually see that we have something very three-dimensional already. If you'd imagine, our horizon line could be a road. and there is a giant skyscraper reaching up to the sky, and we are far above it, almost like we're Superman or Superwoman. But in fact, that's not the last thing we're going to do with this. We are going to continue on with the steps and create a solid that we can see the beginning and end to. So our next step is parallel. This step is one of the trickiest ones in making sure that your solid looks three-dimensional and realistic. The way the rule goes is in between our connection lines that we've done on step 2. We take 2 lines at a time, look at what happens on the figure in between those connection lines, and then we're going to make a line parallel to it somewhere out in this area. So the easiest way for me to do this is I match up my ruler to the side of the figure, I scoop my ruler out a little ways, and then I draw in a parallel line. Now when I come down to these 2 connection spots, when I look what happens in between those, this is a horizontal line. I have just done a vertical line, this is a horizontal line. So I'm going to need to make that line parallel to this horizontal line. I'll match up with my ruler, I'm going to carefully slide it down, put it into place, and I'm going to draw my lines so the parallel lines meet up. Now, once I've done that, I have a very, very three-dimensional looking solid. I have some extra lines back here that I don't necessarily need anymore, but we're going to look at some uses for those lines later on. For now though, I'm going to go with our step 4, which is to erase. And I'm going to erase those lines that we no longer need. Now do keep in mind that if you want to, you can include the parallel lines anywhere in between the connection lines. If I were to have drawn my parallel lines much further back, this would look like a much longer solid. Where I put them, it's a much shorter solid, and then I have a little bit more erasing. And there we have our three-dimensional solid. So that's a square. So let's see what other types of shapes we can do. Now keep in mind, no matter which figure or shape we use, it just says figure. So then we're going to follow through these steps for any figure that we try. Now some people might say, well, what if we wanted to try a triangle? Well, I can show you very simply, we've already done it. If we merely connect on the corners from here using our ruler and do a little bit more erasing, I can show you that we already know how to do a triangle. A triangle to a large extent is just half of a rectangle or a square. So we already have the knowledge on how to do a triangle. So let's try something a little bit more interesting. Let's try something like a circle. Now when you draw your circle, don't worry about if it's perfect. You can try to use a template, or you can trace something if you want to. Otherwise, I'm just going to draw by hand. If you have a shape that turns out a little bit wobbly, no problem. Okay? But we're going to try a circular type shape. Now that's our step 1. Going back down here, I have my figure. The next step that I need to complete then is to connect this figure to the vanishing point. The trouble that you might see though is we had corners to connect from on this shape. On this one we have none. So what we look for instead when we deal with a figure that has curves on it, we're going to look for the farthest edges of those curves. So I'm going to put my ruler on the vanishing point just like this, and I'm going to slide the ruler up. Okay, so I'm pulling down with this hand, I'm moving up with this hand. I'm sliding the ruler, keeping it on the vanishing point, and I find the nearest place that it will touch. From that point is where I make my connection. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, going from the other side. We lock in the ruler on the vanishing point, and we're going to slide, slide, slide until it meets. And once we've found the farthest edge of the curve that will touch, we make our connection line. Okay, so we have our figure. That was a circle. We've now connected it to the vanishing point. Again, what we could see is a very, very, very long cylinder shape. But instead, we're going to go on to parallel, and then we're going to erase. So the parallel line step, we actually only have 2 connection points here, so we have to, again, look at what happens on the shape itself in between those points, and then we will know exactly what to do out here. So since we didn't draw our original figure with a ruler, we're not going to draw this parallel line with a ruler either. I can practice by drawing over this line, getting that sort of familiarity on how to move my hand. Then I'm going to move down further, and I'm going to include that in. So we draw a parallel line. Now, if you'd imagine, I can do my erasing here, and we have a very nice looking cylinder, three-dimensional solid that has been made. However, you can also have a lot of fun with the things that you do. I told you we're going to look at different uses for these lines that we erase, so I am instead going to erase my parallel step, and we'll do something else. If I erase my parallel step, this goes back to making it look like a very, very long cylinder type shape. Now, if we would imagine, we could be in Gotham City looking at the bat symbol flashing into the sky. When drawn in comic books or even attempted for the movies, they use one-point perspective to be able to animate the bat logo that's in the sky. So what I might encourage you to do is to pause the video for a moment and draw your own symbol. No need to do the bat symbol. Any symbol will do. You can do a smiley face, a number, you can do letters, anything that you like. So far, we've covered how to do regular figures such as a square, and then we learned how to do a circle. We're going to move on to some more complicated figures down below here. But I want to remind you that our horizon line acts as our eye level. So now that I've drawn two things above my horizon line, I can see the bottoms of those things. As we move down below the horizon line, we're going to be able to see the tops of things. So let's try a new figure. Any figure will do. There is no figure that you cannot do. So I am going to draw a heart. Now, a heart is interesting. It's a sort of a combination or a blend of the two that we've done before. We've dealt with connecting from corners, we've dealt with connecting from curves, and in fact we're going to have to do a little bit of both for our heart. So, let's begin. Matching up our ruler to the vanishing point, trying to find the furthest edge of this curve right here, I'm going to draw a line that connects to my figure. Matching up with the vanishing point again, I'm going to find the farthest edge of this curve, which if you can see, it's almost minimal. But I do want to get some type of connection line in between here. It will help me do the parallel line step that's coming. Then we're going to keep the ruler on the vanishing point, scoot it along a little bit further, and we're going to connect from the farthest edge of this curve. Now, one thing that I'm going to try, and I'm not sure if it's going to make it, but I have a corner down here. If I can connect to the vanishing point and see a line that is outside of my original figure, I will include it. If I cannot make that line, I will not. But in fact, I can. I can see a little bit of line, so we would want to see how this looks three-dimensionally down here on the heart. And there we go. So, we've gone through step one, we drew a heart figure. We went through step two then, and we've connected to the vanishing point. We used our ruler to make all of our lines. Step three then is parallel. When we add the parallel lines, again, we look for two connection lines and look at what happens in the shape in between that spot. So we have this sort of curve that is happening, so I'm going to take and draw a curve similar to it out here. Now I have two other connection spots. I look at what happens with the curve here. I feel how that goes a couple of times, and then we're going to attempt to draw it in as well. So we put it in right there. Now, I have another connection line down here, and if I were able to see more of it, I might have to do a parallel something down here. But actually, if we measure how far out I put these, it's almost the same here. So I don't need to do anything along the bottom. It means that I have completed step three, our parallel line step is done, and now I'm left with erasing. So we will go back and erase any of our connection lines on the outside of our solid. We're going to close out this tutorial with one more very complicated shape. Keep in mind that any shape or figure will do. You can draw letters, numbers, you can deal with any type of named figure, like squares, circles, pentagons, decagons, any type of shape that you want. But that also includes anamorphic shapes. Anamorphic shapes don't typically have a name, which, by the way, you do not have to draw a shape the same as mine. What you do want to draw for yourself is an anamorphic shape, a shape that has no name. If you would like to pause the video at this point to be able to draw your anamorphic shape. So I have figure. It is a line that closed upon itself, and I'm going to move on to step two, connect to the vanishing point. Now this one is going to be a little bit challenging. We haven't had nearly as many connectors up to this point. You've got to go through and make judgment calls about where there are going to be connection lines. I've already drawn several, and I'm not nearly done yet. This is far more than we've done in any other example so far, but I'm not nearly done. Somewhere out here, then we're going to be looking back here and here. Find the furthest edge of the curve that we can while still matching up with the vanishing point, and we draw a connection line out here. Then I'm going to go around back here on the shape as well. Now, I'm not going to draw this line all the way through. Much like when I did the heart here, I didn't continue that line. I stopped it when I got back to the figure. I'm going to be doing the same thing here. So we match up with the vanishing point. I start at the corner and I draw out until I reach the shape. We're going to do that for this line as well. And nowhere else can I connect to the shape and the vanishing point and not draw through the shape. So I have done all of my connections. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 connections because it was such a complicated figure. Nevertheless, we move on to step 3 and we follow this step exactly how it has been done before. We look at 2 sets of connection lines and draw a line that is parallel to it further along. So I'm going to draw a line parallel to it right there. Here bends in this way. Now this next set is really tricky. Look at what the line does in there. And look at the amount of space we have out here. I cannot replicate that, so we're going to have to rely on a trick. So instead, we're going to measure out about how far you put your parallel lines. Then I'm going to measure from the edge of this. And I'm going to draw a very simple line right there to represent a little piece of the curve back here. But notice that these don't meet. What I followed was about how far away from the shape that I'm putting my parallel lines. So I'll do that again and measure about how far away I am here, and we're going to draw a parallel line that does like that. Now we've got this one as well. We've got the same sort of problem, so I'm going to measure again. These are just casual measurements. Keep in mind you could very easily take your ruler that you have at your disposal and make very actual measurements on what you're doing. This one here, I can't draw a line, I can't draw a line. So I have completed all of my parallel line step for this shape. Now it's time to do our erasing and reveal the solids that we have created. I hope you had fun drawing with perspective. We're going to look at more complicated things in the upcoming tutorials. The next lesson on one-point perspective is going to be all about creating a city scene using the same knowledge that we have applied for creating this. I look forward to teaching you some more about one-point perspective in the next tutorial.